To get the summit off the ground, it is my great pleasure to introduce our headline partner, Bank of Ireland, who have many things to celebrate as we explore what it means to bridge generational differences to embrace equity. At Bank of Ireland, embracing equity is at the heart of who they are. They believe there is a huge opportunity to lead societal change and that inclusion is everyone's business. Today, we have 3 generations of women joining us to share their personal stories, share what equity means to them, and how they are partnering with accountability partners to enable change. They are also joined by their ally, Gavin Kelly, who is a gender balance sponsor champion, who will share what active allyship looks like. Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to the summit. How are you all today?
Very well. Thank you, Meenakshi.
Fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to our next hour. We're going to have a great conversation. And perhaps what we could do is if we could just do a quick round robin, introduce yourselves. And perhaps I can go to Una first because you are my top left-hand corner, and then you can pass the baton on to whoever you'd like to pass the baton on to.
Thank you, Meenakshi. I'm delighted to be here. Very, very powerful opening. Thank you for that. My name is Una Kelly. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a HR leader in Bank of Ireland Group.
I'll jump in next to Una, seeing as you didn't hand over to me, so thanks very much. Gavin Kelly, pronouns are he, him. I am the Chief Executive of Corporate and Markets for Bank of Ireland Group, but also our executive sponsor for our Gender Balance Group network. I'll pass on to Nancy. I see you're next on my screen.
Thanks, Gavin. Thank you, Meenakshi, for having me here. I'm Nancy Toonsey, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a manager on the Credit Policy and Impairment Oversight team.
Thanks, Meenakshi. I'll go next. My name's Eva Doyle, and I am a People Strategy and Transformation Consultant in Bank of Ireland, and my pronouns are she, her.
Thank you very much, everyone. So let's kickstart off with the first thing. The first question that I have on my mind is around barriers. So what barriers have you had to overcome? And if you can share one example each, perhaps. And Una, if it's okay, may I come to you first? You are a parent. What were your challenges? What did they look like? And how did you navigate that world of work and personal life?
Thanks, Meenakshi. So thinking back to when I had my first daughter, who turned 19 last week, at the time, the organisation I worked for, which was an international organisation, but it didn't have an Irish maternity leave policy. So when I spoke to my manager about what maternity leave I'd be entitled to, he said none. There wasn't going to be any paid maternity leave, and in fact, really, I wasn't entitled to it. So, but good luck having my baby, and he'd see me in a few months. And so I was not happy with that answer. Fortunately, the legislation had changed a little bit and was in the process of improving at the time. And so maternity leave was 18 weeks of paid leave with a limit of 70% of your earnings. So statutory maternity leave was only 18 weeks. And until just before I'd had my daughter, there was a compulsory clause in maternity leave that you had to take 4 weeks before the birth of your baby, which would mean that effectively, if your baby didn't arrive on your due date, and let's face it, they rarely do, then you could really only have about 3.5 months of maternity leave with your baby once you've given birth. So it was wholly unacceptable from my perspective for a whole variety of reasons. And I successfully argued that I should not only get paid maternity leave, but it also should be paid at the level of my UK colleagues, because that was the fairly standard practice in application at the time. I think the organisation really struggled with it, actually, and it was a real battle that I faced, but I wasn't prepared to give up. And so eventually managed to negotiate 26 weeks of paid maternity leave, and finished for maternity leave just 2 weeks before I had my baby, who then came 10 days early. And so it was a real eye-opener for me, and I definitely vowed at that stage that I would never let that happen to anyone else, if I could do anything about it. And from a sort of a career and parenting perspective, I think that whole experience was so revelatory and so shocking, but also really galvanized me into action, to try and really drive change in the future.
Mm-hmm. And I think policies are just so important for women. I mean, a recent study by an organisation called The Chief, it highlighted that women want more inclusive policies for them, and every woman, and care leave came up very high as well. So, one of the things that we could urge organizations to think about today is, what do your policies look like, and are they inclusive to women? Thank you. And I suppose the same question to, the rest of you, maybe Una, Nancy, I can come to you next.
Sorry, I was trying to find my unmute button. For me, I'm Zimbabwean, and I joined the bank about 13 years ago. And at the time, I joined on a contract, so it was a 2-year contract. And at the time, after the 2 years, it was my time to leave. But my manager at the time, she worked really hard to get me a permanent contract, which I was so grateful for, because as an ethnic minority woman, we face challenges in terms of entry to employment and progression. So to have somebody fight for your corner to get you that permanent contract, that meant a lot to me at the time. But I don't think she knows this, and I don't think I ever spoke to her about it. But from then on, it's impacted my career within the bank, because I've progressed from starting off at a junior level, and now I'm at a manager level, which has been great. And as ethnic minority, we continue to face barriers in entry to employment or progression, and that has an impact. And it's great to see companies trying to do something about it, and the bank as well, making some strides in that area, and committing to increasing the representation, because it's not only just to have representation, it's also from a business perspective. We've seen issues in terms of design products where there's a lack of diversity. For example, say TJ Fitzpatrick and the soap dispenser issue, where the dispenser didn't recognize his dark palm. It wouldn't work for him, but for a white person, it would work. And it tells me that, in that room when they were designing it, a darker skin tone person wasn't present. And so we need more ethnic diversity, or diversity, to have that voice or perspective as well, in terms of serving the societies that we live in. And to have that within the bank has been good for me.
Eva, if I could come to you next.
Yeah, I think for me, probably the biggest barrier has often been kind of my own behaviors, and it's something I kind of have to work on all the time. And I think it's like, as somebody, like, I'm at the beginning of my career, I'm in the bank nearly 2.5, nearly 3 years now. And I kind of always call myself like a classic people pleaser, in terms of I often find myself over explaining myself, over apologizing. And I found that like that often actually has been one of the biggest challenges. I've been really lucky in a lot of ways in the opportunities that I've been given. And I often find myself in situations where I've, gotten a seat at a table, or been invited into a meeting. But then it's often my own confidence that I hold myself back from actually expressing an opinion or sharing an idea, for fear that I'd step on somebody's toes, or, that somebody would think a certain way about me. And I think I've kind of had to find my own ways to kind of manage that. And I think for me, it's confidence comes from having knowledge, I find. And, it's trying to find small ways to gain that confidence. And I think my role is often involves a lot of project work, and I can come into a project and it could be 2-3 months or even years down the line, and I'm sitting there and I'm expecting to, like that, or I've put this pressure on myself that I'm supposed to know everything and I'm supposed to know everyone and this kind of thing. And I found that even coming out of that and just taking a step back and finding somebody to say, can I have half an hour to explain the context of this project or ask a couple of questions, so that next time I can go in and I have that bit of confidence to share an idea or share an opinion, which I kind of find the hardest thing to do sometimes. So I think it's a work in progress, and I think it's something I'll probably have to continue to work on to build that confidence and to keep chipping away at that kind of self-limiting belief that I think a lot of us have. And also to just not be too hard on myself if I come out of a meeting and I feel like I haven't represented myself that well, or I haven't said enough, or I haven't shared an idea, that that's okay too. And there's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days with it, but just to keep chipping at it, I think.
I think many women do suffer from imposter syndrome. I've been there. I still am there. I'm still working on it every day, but it is step by step. And and I suppose as you get a little bit older and a little bit wiser and the world kind of unfolds a little bit, around you, you do build up that confidence. But no, thank you for sharing that. I just want to remind everyone that, if you do have any questions for our panelists today, please do pop them into the chat box and we will be taking questions off the floor shortly. My next question is, how do women from different generations partner to co-create change, and what does equity mean to them? Nancy, I'd like to come to you first on this question. As a woman of colour, being the first generation in your family to work in a country with a different culture, how are you intentionally partnering to co-create change, and what does that look like for you?
Okay, so like I said, I'm Zimbabwean, so moving here, I moved with my family, and none of us had ever worked in Ireland before, and we didn't know anybody here. So to have networks of women and even allies working with you, it's been great. Like, I've had support in the bank. I run a talk, Women of Colour talk, and I've been supported by women and men as well, where we discuss the issues that we face, and seeing that support and having that support has been great, as well as having people then in terms of mentors and sponsors, which I think is really important, especially where I wouldn't have had, extended family who've worked in Ireland or know how to navigate different situations or, work environments. It's important to have that support system where you can share your ideas or talk to people about how to navigate a certain situation, and having external people as well. I'm part of a professional women's network in Dublin, and they've been a great support to me in terms of expanding my circle and learning about different cultures, and learning about the Irish culture, because I'm Zimbabwean, so I wouldn't have been aware of certain nuances or how to approach different issues. So it's good to have that support, and anyone who doesn't, I'd strongly encourage that you do. And it's good as well that in the bank we have an inclusion and diversity network. So it's different networks that would look at, gender balance, multicultural network, and you find people who either think like you or think differently from you, and everybody has something to teach you. And it's different generations as well. You have the younger generation and the older generation, so we've a lot to learn, and it's good in that sense that I get different perspectives from different people, and I get to talk to people about any issues that I'm facing or how I should approach certain situations. And it's very beneficial, especially for me, who came from a country where we had to set up roots with nobody else that we knew.
I think you hit the nail on the head there around learning. It is about unlearning. It is about our own self-awareness, and how do we go on this journey together to enable that change. Gavin, welcome. Hello. Thank you for joining us as an ally. Grateful to have you here today. What does equity mean to you, and how are you ensuring that everyone trying to get into that room is getting into that room?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I was kind of reflecting just on the conversation so far. When I think about my own career journey, I started in the mid 1990s as a graduate recruit in banking, and what kind of struck me when I was reflecting and preparing for today, at that time, I think there was 20 of us who were on the graduate recruitment program, and it was 50-50 balance, even back then, and continues to be so. So I actually started my career for the first number of years, Manashi, where I didn't actually see there was any difference. Right, to me, there was equality. We didn't really see the difference between gender, and that's kind of the way that I've approached things. But the senior leadership groups and senior teams were always very male dominated. And what's kind of interesting now, almost 30 years later, it's still the same challenge. We still bring and have, like in organizations, 50-50 balance in kind of the early recruitment, the junior grades in the banks. That's the right way to describe it. And then something happens. And I think Una touched on it when she talked about the lack of support and the lack of support when Una was having her first child. And like, we're very lucky to have Una in a senior leadership position in Bank of Ireland, but we could have easily, Una, lost you as well during that transition, right? We relied on you having to stand up for yourself and actually getting through that. And there are a number of role models like Una in industry, thankfully, that are leading the way. But it shouldn't have to be so hard. So I think the challenge, I think for equity in terms of how do we ensure people are showing up and in the room is with that inclusive policies, developing those policies to ensure that everybody has choice, whether it's parenting choices, and that their careers can be supported through those choices and through those transition times in their lives. I mean, the reality of the situation is particularly when it comes to having children, maternity leave is a difficult period. Paternity leave needs to be of the same equality as well, so that so the choice is there for a couple for when they're having a child, or if someone is having a child on their own, that the choice is there for somebody, that their career will be supported regardless of how they choose to have a family, lead their lives, live their lives. And I think that transition and policies to be inclusive, to me, is the single most important thing. Now, the one other point when I'd say that when I have the mic, for want of a better way of putting it, going back to my own experience, I would say it would have been easy for me to just keep the head down and keep going, saying that, over time this will sort itself out because we have these 50-50 balances. I think there is an onus on leaders and senior leaders, particularly senior male leaders, as allies, to ensure that we stand up and actually realize that that's just not enough. Because I'm a real, believer that unconscious bias, and Nancy touched on it there a moment ago, plays a massive role here as well. And we have to try and constantly invest in kind of awareness programs, etc., to ensure that doesn't happen, as well as taking practical steps for things like when people are going for jobs, that we have balanced interview panels, that we've balanced candidate pools. And so, as well as taking practical steps, I think we also need to get a little bit deeper in the context of unconscious bias, and really make people aware of it is really the I think what the training programs can do. So they're being a couple of thoughts in relation to what we need to do more on. I think you're on mute there, Manashi. Yeah.
I'm doing a lot of that today, Gavin, unfortunately. I was just saying, it's great to hear about male allyship. And I think men need to intentionally lean in to be supporting women. And we're hearing a lot more of that today, men going on their DE&I journey and supporting women. So that's great. And thank you for sharing that. And I think, Una, same question to you. What does equity mean to you?
So equity to me really means fairness, and discussion I have with my children actually regularly. So, fairness and equality are two different things. And given the choice, I'd rather be fair. because that's where you create the balanced playing field. That's where you give people the resources and the supports that are appropriate to their needs, rather than giving everybody the same, to discover that that then falls short and doesn't cater for everybody's needs in the right way. So that's, fairness is a huge personal value of mine. And I think sort of thinking and prepping for today's theme as well, and the kind of follow on to my earlier story about maternity leave, was that when I was due to come back from maternity leave, I had an interview for a job in that same company, only to be told by the 2 male interviewers that I probably wouldn't be able to cope doing the job since I had a baby now. And so again, those are things that I'm really delighted that we've codified in the supports that we have in Bank of Ireland Group, where we don't have single gender interview panels. We do have balanced interview application, and we insist on that, and it's codified in our recruitment charter. I think the policies are one element, and then I think the practices are vital. So I'd encourage anyone listening in any organisation to look at not just what does the policy say, but also how does it play out? Do people live and breathe those values? And if it's a constant battle to get people to display the right behaviours, then that's also a conversation that you should be having. And so that's back to our theme of equity. Those are the really important things, of people walking the walk, and not just saying, like, it's in a policy, that'll take care of it. It does need to be lived and breathed as well.
Thank you, Una. Eva, what does equity mean to you?
Yeah, I think, again, like, you know, when I was thinking about this question, I think to me, equity is space, and being given the same space as everyone else. You know, be that at a table or in a room, or just in terms of somebody's time, that I'm getting the same, you know, space as everybody else. And I said, as somebody at the beginning of my career, I have been afforded that luxury in the bank, which has been great. And I think, you know, when I think about like how we co-create change in a generational sense, I think before I started in, you know, the bank, had this like idea of what it was going to be like to be a female in a corporate environment. And I had this almost like Devil Wears Prada mentality of that it was going to be like really competitive, and like, you know, we'd all be kind of stepping on each other's toes, and you know, this kind of like nastiness. And like, it actually hasn't been like that at all, which has been great. And I think like that's probably one of the most powerful ways that we can continue to kind of work and make change, is, you know, to not get in each other's way as women. And you know, that there's I was chatting about it yesterday, that Accenture podcast of, you know, that like when she rises, we all rise, and that, you know, a rising tide like rises all boats. I don't think I said that right, but you know, the sentiment is true. And you know, I also think it goes right back to who we're surrounded by, like at a young age, you know. And I grew up with brilliant parents who, you know, really didn't instill any self-limiting beliefs in me. I had this idea that, you know, I could actually be whatever I wanted when I grew up. And, you know, and I think there's that onus on us to do better than generations before us. And I have benefited from that. And, you know, coming into the corporate environment, it's people like Una who have fought for that change, means that I won't, I'm sure I will have my own fights, but I won't have to do that particular fight. I don't think I will ever have to fight for maternity leave, or, you know, and I hope that's the case. But, you know, so now it's kind of like, I feel that there's things that I can start doing now at this early stage to kind of continue that journey. And also that, you know, someday when I hopefully have my own kids, that I'll be able to continue that belief that, you know, they'll be able to do whatever they want. So I think it's about continuing the journey that came before me.
Fantastic. And I just want to stay with you here, Eva, for a second, because when we spoke last week, you mentioned that you've been really fortunate to be surrounded by female managers at Bank of Ireland. You know, how important is this? You know, you've spoken about Una leading the kind of way to create paths for you. How important is female allyship to you? And can you give one example, you know, in your current times, you know, how have Bank of Ireland led the way in creating that change for you?
Yeah, it is. It's something I talk about all the time, is the 4 incredible managers I've had since I started in the bank, who were all female. and Claire and Adele and Kate and Nev, they have, like, honestly, they've completely, I think, like, I believe, changed the trajectory of my career in terms of the amount of opportunities and the amount of influence that they've had as 4 really incredible leaders. And they have completely instilled this confidence in me and my abilities, and also just given me, like, every opportunity to use that and to, you know, achieve whatever I want within the bank, but also, like, within my career. They've really taken an interest in me as a person rather than just my role within the bank, and that it's given me this real passion about people management and how important that actually is on, you know, junior colleagues. And it's something, you know, that I really am going to take forward with me as I hopefully move into management roles later in my career, that how, you know, the influence that they had on me and how I hope to bring that forward with me as well. They really have been incredible. And I think often when we talk about allyship, we think of people like Gavin, or, you know, we think of male allyship, but actually female allyship is, to me, as important and has been as instrumental as male allyship. And it's in, you know, it's in every aspect of my life. It's in my personal life. You know, I have brilliant friends and brilliant family who, the same thing, that instilled that confidence, that often it's myself holding me back, and sometimes you need that, you know, bit of validation or that bit of confidence instilled from somebody else to really push you forward, and, you know, to kind of break down, I mean, actually what you were talking about earlier, that imposter syndrome of, you know, oh, I don't think I'll be able for this, but actually none of my 4 managers in Bank of Ireland have ever, you know, let me believe that. They've always pushed me to do incredible things, and I really owe a lot to them in terms of how, you know, happy I am in my career today, and the opportunities that I have been given. So thanks to them. They're great. They're brilliant people.
And thank you to the wonderful women at Bank of Ireland who have supported you and led you and guided you in your career today. And I'm sure there'll be many more years to come of that. But Gavin, let me come to you on allyship, and actually active allyship. How are you showing up? And could you give us one example of what active allyship looks like for you and Bank of Ireland?
Yeah, I'd say there's a couple of kind. Una touched on it earlier, Manashi, where there's a number of strands to it. So I might give a couple of examples if that's okay. Firstly, I think just even doing things like sponsoring this network and making sure that this network gets the appropriate airtime, if that's the right word for it, within the group. So it's one of the things I've noticed is you can never take this network for granted. You can never assume that you know, everything is fine and we don't need to, you know, continue to bring the network to the fore. I think we have to continuously keep it there and keep it to the forefront. So I think that's a very important role that I personally have to play, and the wider leadership team in the bank. So that's the first thing. We touched already on things like the policies, etc. But I think one of the things that Una had mentioned, and it's really important for me, is active taking active interventions directly with senior leaders, both male and female, and in particular encouraging people on their careers and mentoring. So one of the things that I commit to is to mentor senior female leaders, junior female leaders that you know, want to progress their careers through the organization. Like several examples of people that I've helped and encouraged, and hopefully you know, that has helped them. But equally, and I think this is really important, it's not all one way. I learn a huge amount from them as well, and they hold me to account in the context of how we develop, whether it's our policies or how ultimately on our journey towards having equities, where one day, and hopefully it's not as long as you said at the introduction, but one day we don't have to talk about this anymore, because we just take it for granted. That's the ultimate aim of all of this, that we don't have to have conversations and talk like this. But I learn a lot as well. So there's mentorship, and there's that concept of reverse mentorship as well, I think is really, really important. And sometimes that gets a bit lost when we're talking about how we, you know, mentor individuals through their careers and help and support them. And I would say one final point I'll make on this, particularly being there for people who at times at low points in their career where maybe they are thinking about taking a different direction, or they don't feel they're getting the support from the organization, just being there to listen and help and support them. Because as I said earlier, I don't mean to be using Una's example, but when Una said she got through all that, notwithstanding some like terrible support from her line management, or the complete lack of support from her line management, Una, it sounds like, relied on yourself, Una, to get through. I mean, I think there are a number of people that probably will fall away if they don't have the type of mentorship and people that will step in at those kind of critical points as well to help and support them on their decision and on their journey.
Thank you, Gavin, for that. And thank you for being transparent and very honest about it wasn't right, it wasn't perfect, but the bank and the women and the male allies have worked towards inclusive policies. And just staying on the theme of inclusive policies, and it seems to be a bit of a common thread in our conversation here, I've got a question that's coming from Tim Hardy-Ledig, and Una, this one is for you. Following your experience working for an international company which didn't have relevant policies for your country, how would you advise multinationals to prioritize the policies, procedures to be locally relevant? Any key ones you suggest we start with?
Thanks, actually, great question, Tim. I think I would start from a needs basis. So clearly, you'll have the compliance element in terms of policies and procedures you have to comply with for any organization setting up in a different country. I think I would say, wherever your parent company is based, don't ever assume that things apply the same internationally. I did work for international organizations for a good chunk of my career, and used to regularly get the question of, Una, how will this work in international? And I'd go, but that's not one place, right? So every other country is not the same, or isn't one homogenous group that's just different from one other country. So actually you have to go country by country. But I would say, actually look at the profile of the employees in your organization. So what are the needs? Look at the demographic and start there. So if you've got, based on the sort of intergenerational profile, for example, or based on just all of the demographics of the employees, well, then look at what matters and then ask the colleagues. Ask what really matters. I remember working in an organization where there was kind of an assumed position on, certain employee benefits, and colleagues came back and I consulted with them, and they said, actually, the thing that really matters is, for example, having healthcare coverage where you can get out-of-pocket expenses covered quickly. So I don't want to have to wait a year for my claim. Actually, if I could do that quarterly, it would make a massive difference to me because of the age and stage of colleagues. And that was something that we put in place. So I think having that listening approach is really important, and understand your employee base. And I think, to touch on something that Gavin said there as well, which really resonated with me, is don't assume things. Don't assume that So don't assign policies or practices based on what you think is the right thing to do. Go and ask. I think at Bank of Ireland Group, we're really good at listening to our employee network groups. I think we're really good at taking feedback. I think some of the best things that we have done have come from individual colleague suggestions that sometimes just made through by happenstance, or it might have just been a kind of gentle suggestion, maybe we could have a look at this, and they have been some of the most powerful things we've done. So I really believe in not assigning or assuming that you have all the answers at a more senior level, but actually get in there and develop that active listening, and go from there.
Thank you. I've got another question for the group, and feel free to, whoever wants to take this question, it's open to the floor. As a recruitment consultant, so we've got a question from Connor McConnell. As a recruitment consultant, what advice would you, I've just lost that question. What advice would you have to get over the first barrier of attracting more women to careers that are viewed as male dominated?
I might take that, if that's okay, actually.
Yeah.
I think it probably goes back to, it's twofold. It's role modeling. It's, when you see it, you can be it. It's about the fact that I think women are probably less likely to go for roles that they don't see any women in. But then also in terms of the actual, from a recruitment, from a, that perspective, I know, I think it's about really embracing things like flexibility and support, and you know, those kind of elements of your employee proposition that make a role attractive to apply for, and making it as easy as possible for females to feel like they will be supported in work. And I think that really helps in terms of you know, getting over the barrier, which often we see as the biggest barrier is just the actual applying for the role, and that sometimes it's not that we don't have, you know, that there's not brilliant female candidates out there. It's that sometimes they don't have the confidence or the support to actually take that step to apply for it. So I think it's about you know, adding things into the proposition of your you know, your job ads and your recruitment policies that make it really supportive for women to apply to it, and also that they can see other women in those roles as well.
Thank you, Eva. And Conor, I hope that helps. I hope that answers your question. Nancy, if I could come to you next. What allies do you need so that they can show up in a meaningful way as a woman of colour?
Like for me, allies can be anybody really. It could be female, it could be male. And it's just about understanding what issues you're facing. So you need active allies who want to know the challenges, your barriers you're facing, in order then to try and drive that change to see what they can do. So it's great when people or allies ask, what can we do? And what challenges or barriers are you facing? And to push that through. And I've seen that. I have active allies who I work with, and it's been great that they've been championing initiatives that I've started. And that's what you need. You need support, and you need people who want to find out about you. Not everybody faces the same challenge. Like, we're all women, say Eva and Una, but we're all facing different challenges by virtue of who we are and our different generations. So you want allies to find out what challenges are you facing and what they can do, and to champion that and show that they're being active or intentional with their allyship.
Thank you, Nancy. I want to go around the virtual table now and ask everyone to perhaps leave this session with a thought, a challenge, a question to our delegates, something that they can take away, where it perhaps might spark a bit of an aha moment. Maybe Gavin, if I could come to you first.
Yeah, I think what you're picking up from the panel, and certainly I am, is the power of networks and active mentorship and seeking it out, and for mentors to show up, and leaders to be there for people as well. So I think what step would you take today, or what would you think about, like, if you're not mentoring today, or if you're could you mentor one other person, or could you go, if you don't have a mentor, could you go and look for a mentor? Because I think Eva touched on it earlier when you hear her talking about the 4 managers that she's had. Eva, like, that's the kind of inspiration that you need along the way in your career. We all have ups and downs in our career. We all face different choices at different times, and having that network and that mentorship I think is critical. So that'd be the one thing I'd say to people: seek out those mentors. And the other thing I'd say, and I really want to just pick up on one other point, because it came up when you mentioned imposter syndrome and confidence. I leave one other thought: if you're 50-50 on going for a job and you really want the job, apply for it. I really mean it, apply for it, because you'll just be surprised, even if you're 30-70. And I say this constantly all the time when we talk to our female networks and our female programs for senior female leadership. Apply for jobs, because male candidates do, even when they're 10% confident they can do the job, they still put their name forward for it, right? And that's not right either. That's a whole other conversation. But what I would say, if you're even 30 or 40% certain on going for a job, apply for it.
I like the 30-70 or the 70-30 rule.
Yeah.
Maybe we can create that rule, Gavin. The 70.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Let's do it. Eva, come to you next. One thought, one challenge.
I think give people space. I think it's probably the most important thing that we can do as people in general, is just to give other people space. And sometimes I think that is, you know, if it's a seat at a table, if it's, you know, a invite to a meeting, it can actually be so instrumental in building somebody's confidence, but also in bringing other ideas into a room. So, you know, a bit like, sorry, Gavin, I'm going to steal your point now, but, you know, if somebody pops into your head that you say, oh, maybe their opinion could be beneficial in this, or, you know, maybe adding them to this meeting could really, you know, as I said, even if you're only 30% sure, give them a chance, give them the space to, you know, enter the room and take a seat at that table, and they'll probably be thankful for it. I definitely am. So yeah, and it's that space that has afforded me so many opportunities. So that's what I would leave you with.
Yeah, I love that piece around the seat at the table. I always sit very strategically. It's really important. Who would like to go next?
I will jump in, if that's okay. So I think for me, there's two things. One is sort of be a bias interrupter, right? So if you're thinking about what you can do as a role model, what you can do as an ally, before, when you hear the little you know, the little comments that people make sometimes, like, oh, you know, so and so left early to do something, oh, like they're taking a half day, you know, stuff like that. So those little microaggressions, I think a really good thing to do as a role model and as an active ally is to go, what do you mean by that? Could you say that again? You know, just those little bias, just those little interruptions can actually make people think twice and not do it again. So I think those can be very active, you know, very positive influences that you can have that can change a culture and make it so much easier for other people to live their lives. So, you know, people make little throwaway comments, or they can do, and without really understanding the impact, and without really understanding that, you know, that could really ruin someone's day or really upset them, or in fact, you know, be a big setback that could take them time to overcome. So I think, you know, being that bias interrupter and being that kind of positive role model can be really, really powerful. And then I think behind back to the positive active allyship. So I think everyone has really touched on it, and I wouldn't want to understate the importance and the power of being that sponsor. So women at times can be under sponsored. You know, there can be a lot of offers of mentoring, but not enough offers of sponsorship, as in who's talking about you when you're not in the room in a positive way that can help you. So who's saying, hey, have you thought about X? You know, before you kind of just go through your phone list and call the people that you usually call, maybe you could think about this other person who could really add value here. So I think that sort of really active allyship could go a long way as well.
Thank you, Una. And I think for those that are listening on today, if a coach or a mentor does not come to you, go and find them. They are there. People are willing to help. You've also got to be active as well, right? Nancy.
I think I'll piggyback off Una's comment on, you know, the bias, calling it out. Like, I think, you know, allies or anybody in a room, if you hear it, you know, say something. Don't just be quiet and let it slide. But then again, I think we all need to expand our circles to learn a bit more, be it from the younger generation, the older generation, or people from different walks of life. I think if you expand your circle and talk to different people or connect with the women that are going to be speaking today, just to hear their stories and challenge your own biases as well, I think we can all learn from each other.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you everyone for joining us today. It's been a really, really great conversation. I want to thank you, thank you to our 3 generations of women, Nancy, Una, Eva, and their ally, Gavin, for a really rich discussion on how to embrace equity, and with great examples of how Bank of Ireland are leading the way in activating for change, and your of course your very generous support with Equality Leaders. Thank you so much. And I think one final thought from me today is, I would say to all those women listening in today, I would say choose to surround yourself by people who will say your name in a room full of opportunities. Go and find them. They are there. I did, and I am so much better for it. Thank you, Gavin, Una, Eva, and Nancy. It's been a really great pleasure to have kickstarted our International Women's Day 2023 Summit with you. And thank you for your very, very generous partnership.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye bye.
Thank you.